I'd like to call this meeting of the Christiansburg Town Council to order. And at this time, we're going to take a moment of reflection. And I'll ask council members that are familiar and know Joe Coyle. His mother died today. And so if you'll keep him and his family in your thoughts, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. I'm going to ask to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask Councilman Henry Showalter if he would lead us.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
One addition.
One addition, that's the...
Closed meeting in regards to legal matters over the noise ordinance.
Okay, you got the wording to Mr.
I have it.
Bishop. Okay, so that will be under 9 other business, 9B.
11.
Whatever, it's close enough.
No, it's not.
Oh, I had the X on the wrong side then. All right. When we get ready to do the other closed session, we'll do this one too. How's that work? Mr. Collins, are your high school students here tonight?
I haven't seen them, no, sir.
Okay, so if they come, we would like to, if they have a report, I would like to add them in between citizens' comments and introductions and presentations.
Thanks.
If they show, we're glad to do that.
Yeah.
Need a motion in a second.
I'll make a
I need
motion.
on both.
Second.
Motion is second, Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir. Councilman Bishop?
Aye.
Councilman Collins?
Aye.
Councilman Hall?
Aye.
Councilman Hubbard?
Aye.
Councilman Showalter?
Aye.
Councilman Stipes?
Aye.
It's 6-0. Thank you very much. We have 3 public hearings scheduled tonight. The first is a budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2017-2018. Mr. Wingfield, Mr. Stipes,
Yes.
Ms. Tweedy, he's got it.
Well, I'll start by saying, I mentioned at the last meeting, the Finance Committee, which is Mr. Showalter and myself, met for 3 hours with Ms. Tweedy and Mr. Wingfield. We might have met more than that, but the last one was a long one. And I'm going to ask Mr. Wingfield and Ms. Tweedy to provide the details of that, but I just want the council to know that we've given this a lot of intensive look, and we're comfortable with the amendment as it's being presented to you. Would you like to add anything before we present that?
No, I'm comfortable with it.
There was a cover sheet and a summary of the budget amendment in the packet. Just for purposes of public comment, I'll just kind of go through that. In the original budget for 2017-18, it was projected that our beginning special revenue fund balance would be $681,879, and the general fund balance would be $20,424,968. At the end of the fiscal year for the special revenue fund, its balance finished at $832,716, which was an increase of $150,837. And for the general fund, the unassigned fund balance ended at $23,982,472. There was a rollover of additional $3,557,000 in available unassigned fund balance. The budget amendment requests the use of $1,876,661 of that unassigned general fund balance to adjust for rollovers of budgeted items not expended before the end of the fiscal year, but already committed for completion. There were several new grants for capital projects and a new economic development project for streets, sidewalks, stormwater, pond improvements. The amendment provides for adjustment of our pay plan for sworn law enforcement officers to remedy pay disparity issues, adds a new position to Public Works at no cost due to restructuring for better efficiency. It adds a special events coordinator to handle the farmers market and all special events of the town. There's also additional support from the general fund for the storm drain for $42,900 to repair a collapsed drain at Tuckers Ferry Road, and a $50,000 adjustment of carryover budget funds for several other drain capital projects. The additional support for the water sewer enterprise is $126,000 for an emergency repair of a collapsed sewer line on Independence, and to adjust for the carryover of budgeted amounts for several other capital projects. There are several changes in the special revenue funds requiring $6,120 of additional out of the $150,837 in available special fund revenue balance.
Ms. Tweedy, could I ask you one question? The budget amendment, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. I've got that it was 1.908.
That was before we made a couple changes. We took out, it should be 1,000,008.
1.8? Okay.
We took out the one item. What was it? Pay change, this pay study.
Okay.
And the item we took out was we wanted Ms. Sachs to be a part of that discussion when she starts. She's here this evening. You can join the party here.
Okay. We done with that one?
You want to speak on
Some
Public
questions?
hearing,
Comments?
citizen comment,
Do what?
public
It's a
hearing.
public hearing.
citizen
Anyone speak on
comment.
Yes. So it is open. Anyone here to address or would like to address this budget amendment? Hearing no one, I will close that public hearing. We'll go to the next, which is a rezoning request by John Neal, Gay and Neal Incorporated, agent for Sarah Crawford, for tax map numbers 530-2-85B, 86A, 87A, and portions of tax map number 530A1, located on the corner of Glade Drive Southeast and Curtis Drive Southeast, from A, agriculture to R3 multifamily residential. The property is designated as residential on the future land use map of 2013 Christiansburg Comprehensive Plan. Is there anyone here to address this issue? Name, rank, serial number, you know how that works, y'all.
Is this also going to be displayed?
Is this display for the public?
I think Andrew can bring it up within the.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. My name is John Neal. I'm an engineer with Gay Neal Incorporated here in Christiansburg. I'm here tonight representing Sarah Crawford, the owner of the property, as well as Golden Triangle Development, which would be the developer, builder of the project. We're proposing to rezone approximately 13 acres to R3, which the mayor mentioned that's multifamily, but we are offering up a proffer with that rezoning to only construct single-family housing. And that was one of the concerns during the planning commission meeting with some of the neighbors, and rightly so. And we, with our project and our planned housing development, that would be a CUP after this rezoning. And I'll speak to both of these if that's okay, both public hearings at one time. But we would be proffering only single-family housing. So that's kind of the avenue to get to the planned housing development is rezoning to R3, and then we're proffering single-family housing. We have two concepts that were incorporated into our rezoning application and the planned housing development CUP application. And they really only have one difference between the two, and that is the stormwater management for the project. Specifically, we're working, or attempting to work with VDOT and the town of Christiansburg, work with the town engineering staff a little bit on this, to potentially develop a regional stormwater management facility on the VDOT property. That is the triangle that is at the top of the screen there. And so then the second concept is if we were unable to do that and work that out with VDOT and the town, we'd need to put the stormwater management facility on our property. We'd have less number of lots. Now, one question you might have is, why is the second one show a much smaller blue stormwater management facility area than the upper one? And that is because, and Andrew, if you wouldn't mind scrolling back down. This facility here would take into account, there was a pond that was supposed to be constructed as part of the Interstate 81 improvements that has not been constructed as of today. I'll be honest with you, maybe the town engineering staff could shed some light on it. I think we're both at a loss as to kind of the schedule for the construction of that pond. And so the developer has offered up, and we've looked at potentially offering to build that pond and incorporate into it our stormwater management requirements as well. The entire site, as you see it, flows from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen, and then into some storm drainage that the town installed several years ago. The town did some stormwater management and storm drain improvements along the back of the lots along Glade Drive, and they provided a point for that VDOT pond to discharge to. That was several years ago. Couple of the other features. So that's the one difference between the two options. Then I'll talk a little bit about the overall project. This proposed development would mimic Seneca Springs, which is the same developer. That's out on Crispin Mill Road, if you're familiar with that. It came through the town in kind of a similar process several years ago. The contractor's getting to the point of completing that project. They're looking to move on to the next one. Worked out with Ms. Crawford to purchase this property, and they want to build something very similar to Seneca Springs. This layout that we have and we've worked on is intersection, two streets extending both Glade and Glade and, I'll mess it up every time. Glade and Giles, Glade and Curtis. This is Giles down here. Extending Glade and Giles to an intersection, and then creating an entrance to a small neighborhood park, which is just a little over half an acre, a half-acre park at the end of the development. And we have sidewalks on both streets extending down to the park throughout the neighborhood. And then we also have a little bit of green space, buffer zone between the lots that are on Curtis. The rear of those lots are on the sides of our lots. So trying to create a little bit of a buffer strip. It's about 10 foot there, and hopefully preserve some of those existing trees that are along that property line. I think there was one comment about it was a pretty small area, and it is. But we, instead of putting that on the lots where some future homeowner might cut those trees down, we want to put it in an actual buffer yard space.
John, the whole thing is 13.5 acres, give or take?
It's just over 13 acres.
Okay. And is that including, I mean, that's not just the residential areas, but that's the entire concept,
That's
correct?
the entire property except for the VDOT property that shows that blue stormwater management.
Okay.
That's
So basically the
about
V
2
that
acres.
comes in, that's not included. Okay.
Now, go over that again, you've talked to VDOT, so you just haven't heard from them.
Yes, sir. We've been trying to work with them on two fronts. One, potentially acquiring the property. The Golden Triangle is working to try to acquire the property because it's surplus right away. VDOT has come back to them and said, hey, submit the application. And Mr. Sipes' question, because like there's supposed to be a VDOT stormwater management pond there.
No, listen, you're doing a good job.
So it is up in the air, and as we've tried to work with VDOT, it is a pretty slow and cumbersome process. So we have two alternatives. One that we were suggesting to hopefully shorten up that process of acquiring that excess right-of-way was for VDOT to let the town take over that property and create a regional stormwater management pond that would meet the original intent for the pond for the Interstate 81 road work, as well as the future public streets extension of Glade and Giles, as well as our development, and incorporate all that into one. So we've got two different avenues that we're pursuing. One of them may work, or the other, or possibly neither. And if neither of them work, then we go to that concept too. But in working with Mr. Crawford and Gold Triangle and the town planning staff, we did not feel like that created a tremendous change in the design of the subdivision of what we'd be proposing. So wanted to kind of take this forward. Constructing patio-style homes is what the proposal is, like Seneca Springs. The demographic for these homes is kind of trended toward an established buyer or empty nesters, is what we've seen. They're mostly single-level homes, although they do have a second floor with a couple of extra bedrooms. The master is on the main level. We had a pretty good discussion at the Planning Commission public hearing, and then Planning Commission went out and took a site visit, and we walked back from the Glade Drive intersection back onto the property a little ways. It was getting dark on us, but Planning Commission was able to see the property. And then at the last meeting, the Planning Commission voted to recommend approval. I think it was unanimous for the rezoning, and then I think it was 5-1 for the planned housing development. And I think one of the planning commissioners was concerned about the green space and making sure that happened if we took this project forward. And that's kind of what this master plan and our rezoning document calls for, is that it would be developed in accordance with this.
Well, in either concept you went with, it's still going to have that green space in basically the same area.
Yes, sir.
It's still going to be there. I love the idea, frankly, about the neighborhood park on the corner. Again, I think frankly, I guess that's the foresight we frankly expect with you, John, at this point.
So we heard three specific concerns, I think, from some of the residents, and they may be here and want to get up and speak to those as well. But the concern over it being multifamily with R3, we've taken care of that with the proffer for only single-family housing. And then traffic, there was a concern of the additional traffic, and that there's kind of only two ways out of the entire neighborhood here, one being Tower Road and the other being McDaniel back over to Fallen Branch Road. Tower Road is slated, I think, to receive a new signal. It's kind of on the books. I don't know exactly what status of design and construction it is, but that is on the books, to the best of my knowledge, from the town. That would hopefully allow people to get out of the neighborhood, signal stop traffic on Roanoke Street and all that, to leave. And then also, we have, when they brought up the McDaniel concern, because you go down to the bottom of McDaniel, it is relatively steep. It's something about a 10 to 12% grade, and the position that you have to stop on McDaniel, when you look, you don't have very good sight distance back to the left. And in talking with VDOT in Montgomery County, because here's the Montgomery County town line, so all of that property is in the county. And talking to them, they said that if a group of citizens got together and submitted a request to the Board of Supervisors, that would be the first step in seeing if one of a couple things could happen. Either you could potentially turn McDaniel and Fallen Branch into a three-way stop, so that the people coming up Fallen Branch towards 81 would have to stop, so that the people coming out of McDaniel would feel a little safer taking a right onto Fallen Branch Road, or potentially doing some sight distance improvements. There's a bank there and a bunch of foliage and things like that prevents you from seeing. And even when you stop at the stop sign and then you creep out to the edge of Fallen Branch Road, it's still a little challenging to see back that way. Now, it's down there, I think, a half a mile or so, or a mile. So those were the two of the concerns, and then the third concern was water pressure. And we met with the town engineering staff, and they issued a memorandum, and hopefully you have a copy of that, where they did not have any specific concerns and did not feel that the addition of these single-family houses would create any additional concerns or loss of pressure for the neighborhood. There is a fire flow issue that's existing throughout the neighborhood as it is. We are allowing and will have planned to put all 8-inch water lines in this neighborhood. They're 6-inch throughout the existing neighborhood. There's nothing we can do about theirs. We can put in 8-inch here, and we're going to allow for an easement at the base through the park, through the edge of the park, so that at some point, if the town brings a water line down Fallen Branch, that they could extend it and tie on through our property. And that is the bulk of my comments. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
I may have a question, but if I can ask Mr. Warren if it's possible, for everybody that's in the audience, can you bring up a map of the town so that you can pinpoint this location for everyone, if that's possible?
Let's see,
Right there.
does this, let me zoom in here real quick.
And while he's doing that, Mr. Neal, my question's I remember just dealing with VDOT, I guess with their formula with traffic and all. We've dealt with that as a council a number of times. But if I recall, they always estimated basically like 2 cars per house and approximately 10 trips per day is that still the running?
I think that's generally the rule of
The rule of thumb, a rule of thumb.
Single-family residential development.
And so, either way we go here, and this is still regarded as R3 multifamily, but its proffer is going to be nothing but basically single-family dwellings. So either way we go, it's either 60 units or it's 56 units, depending on which is the 2 proposals, basically, depending upon really the stormwater is going to be a determining factor. And so, just doing the math, that's an awful lot of trips per day, and we do hear Tower Road scares me as a member of this council because I think it's very dangerous out there, and I'm hoping that we're able to move forward in the very near future and help to we're not going to eliminate, but hopefully we can somewhat mitigate the danger that's out there. I'm trying to I know where this is, and I'm trying to see where this is going to flow to. Is this going to all this traffic, or at least about a half of it, is going to flow onto Tower, or is it? I'm looking at the funnel basically.
So what and maybe some of the residents get up and speak.
Sure.
What I thought I heard from a lot of them is that a lot of folks go on McDaniel
Okay.
To go out to the bypass if they're going,
All right.
Either
Thank you, Mr. Warren, by the way.
north or south on 81 or even to Blacksburg. I think what I heard from that, quite a few of them, and I would assume that there's some dividing line there along Glade Drive where it's quicker to go out to Tower, and at some point, and I don't know where that point is, but the group along Glade and Giles and McDaniel and Curtis, I think probably typically would go out McDaniel and then to Fallen Branch Road to get here. So they would go.
Yes, I understand. Yeah, I think that, and Harry, you live out there, correct? Out that
I live out in that area, yes, sir. And I think you're exactly right, John. I think that's how it flows. And a new traffic light will help a lot out there.
Yeah, it's neat.
And I think we heard that the traffic light was already warranted prior to us proposing this
That's right.
rezone.
Yes, sir.
I have 2 quickies here. Concerning the park, are you guys going to fix it up a little bit? Is it going to be a playground or something like that, or is it just going to be, are you going to do something for it?
I think his intention is to create some level play space and put in some type of amenity. I think it really kind of ends up depending on who he sells to and how the neighborhood gets made up. At this time, there's no specific plan for any specific things.
All right, but you think in the future there will be some?
Well, I think they plan for a parking with the sidewalks coming there to do something.
The buffer zone here too, would you go over that? You have to go back to the other slide.
So there's a 10-foot along the back property line,
Yeah.
the 3 houses between Glade and Giles along Curtis.
There it is,
Did he say he?
Propose a 10-foot buffer yard there.
okay.
Because it is,
So there'll be nothing in that, in the buffer?
yes, sir, correct.
Goes up and around.
As well as
Yeah,
this
this is already
green
out.
space that's up here,
That's
kind
what
of
we
around the
said.
pond beside lot 14 on Glade Drive.
Agriculture.
2 quick questions, Mr. Neal.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the jurisdictional line there at the bottom of the property. What is, maybe this question for Mr. Warren, but we had this at Kensington too. Are you having to go through this same process with the county, or?
So we are not.
Going to get a boundary line adjustment, or?
That's a good question. We have met with the county, and they said that they were okay with it staying as is, but the best thing would be for this property to come into the town.
Right.
And we've already kind of got a draft letter ready to go as soon as the rezoning, if the rezoning was approved, to request to bring this into the town, here in this section right here.
Okay.
For those lots. The county said that they did not, and working with Mr. Warren, I think he was unsure right now whether if we bring that in, if we can bring it in as what it was rezoned, or if it would have to come in as something different. We have to work through that logistical process of, we may have to come back to you at some point, I think, to go through the little rezoning process for the backyards of those
Right, there's 5.
houses.
We're not, I guess, I think I speak for council, I'll speak for myself. I'm not too concerned if the developer is at risk for whatever,
Yes.
hoops have to be jumped through, but the town's not at risk for having that jurisdictional line run through, and that's to approve this
Yeah,
plan.
we've had subdivisions approved previously with lines going through.
Okay.
The county's even been agreeable for buildings to pass over the line if they're majority in town
Okay.
and use town setbacks.
Second question, is there a drainage problem? You don't need topo or anything, is there? I see that it appears that the interest in working with VDOT is you can get more lots. And it serves a greater public need because you're handling more stormwater. But is there a drainage problem in that area now or not?
So there's not a drainage problem on this property. It all generally flows down. There is a large culvert that comes under the interstate that's kind of back towards the left-hand side of my blue triangle there. And it flows, and there's a ditch cut all along. The town, and the town staff might be able to speak to this, the town did a drainage project at some point in the past. I think there definitely used to be some drainage problems. But as part of the interstate work, this pond was planned, although it's not constructed yet, and they did some storm drain improvements, and the town, I think the town itself, I don't know if they hired a contractor or who built it, but the town put in a storm drain line all the way along the backs of those lots on Glade there, and put a flared-in section that's right there at the edge of that blue to accept the pond structure at some point as part of the VDOT project. That hasn't taken place yet.
So there's actually a closed drainage system on the back of the property.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Harry, I think Court has a good point here. Can you help out? I'm seeing there could be a traffic problem here. Do you see that, Harry?
Nope.
Okay.
I wonder if the developer, I know since it seems that a good majority of these new homes may be using McDaniel, if the developer is willing to help with any of that improvement to those roads. Now, Kate, I mean, I don't know what's been addressed or not, but.
You can't require anything.
Well, we can't require it, but, we have a lot of good faith stuff that's been done.
Well, that's one of the things that we kind of did some legwork, if you will, as part of when we got comments at the planning commission stage, was talking with VDOT, talking with the county about the process for trying to get some of those improvements at the intersection of Daniel. The issue there, if we were to potentially try to take that on, is that bank down on McDaniel, if you're looking left, is on a private piece of property. And so that would really kind of have to come from the county and VDOT, working with that landowner. And that landowner may just say no at that point. So it would be hard for us to, it'd be hard for me to recommend to the developer to commit to something that he may not be able to do or
Sure.
be beholden to someone else.
Steve, when you mentioned about the traffic, any traffic going on Tower at this point where we stand today, it does worry me.
Yeah.
But the reason that's why I'd asked Carrie, but it seems like, and what John's mentioning, is that McDowell is going to be the one that's really utilized, if you will, more so for this particular development here. It's much more, I guess, quicker and more readily accessible to get back over.
I think so.
And that would make
I don't
sense.
live out there, so
Back towards town.
I can't say for sure, but
Right.
just thinking about it, I think most of these people, for the most part, would go out McDaniel.
And I think that's exactly right, Steve. That's how come I said there will be no problem up at the light up there, because most of these folks will go out up the falling branch.
And I believe that a study is being made about a light on Tower. Didn't we talk about that?
Oh,
a
that's
couple
already
It's already
of
done.
times?
It's
Yeah.
done.
Wayne, what's the projection on that?
We have a resolution in front of you this evening.
Right.
And
Pretty quick.
Good timing.
Good luck, Town.
and we should know in the spring if it's funded.
Okay.
But that is a steep grade going down that other
McDaniel.
McDaniel.
Yeah.
So, I mean, inclement weather, that would push people to the tower.
Yes.
Any other questions for John?
Good presentation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks,
Thank you all
y'all.
for your time.
Is there anyone else here that would like to address this issue? If you are interested, name and address, and come to the front and address the council.
I know, Bob, can get back to John.
I'd like to address the R3 zoning. I've asked the planning department to look at, the reason that people got confused was because it's zoned R3, because that's the only choice they had when they had the plan development. I'd like them to look at putting a plan development in R1 as well, to take away that, take a look at.
Okay. If there's no one else to address the public hearing, then I will close the public hearing. Under the consent agenda, we have a lot of things. Before I get into it, he addressed both. I guess the one question I have is for our attorney. I see there are 8 resolutions that call for a voice vote. Do we have to approve each individual resolution in this consent agenda?
No, as far as I'm concerned, you can do them all at the same time. Consent agenda.
Okay. All right.
I would move that we approve the consent agenda, which includes items A through K as presented on the agenda.
And I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second, so your consent vote to this is consenting aye to all the resolutions we have in front of us.
That's correct.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. Councilman Bishop? Councilman Collins?
Aye.
Councilman Hall?
Aye.
Councilman Hupper?
Aye.
Councilman Showalter?
Aye.
Councilman Stipes?
Aye.
It is 6-0. Thank you very much. Next is our citizens' comment section. We have allotted time for individuals to come and address council on issues and items that they may have concern or would like to talk about or would like to raise questions on. Again, it's you give your name and address, residence address, and limit it to 5 minutes. Is there anyone here that would like to address council? Mr. Martin?
Stacy Martin, 1480 Turnberry Lane, Reiner, Virginia. I live at 1645 North Franklin, quite literally.
14 hours a day at least, huh?
Yeah. This will probably be my last visit before Mr. Hall is gone, so I just wanted to say thank you for your service, Mr. Hall.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
We appreciate what you've done, and we look forward to what you're doing in the future. Also, just wanted to give you an update. Last time, we had it organized with Ms. Tweedy and also Kim
Widrig.
yeah, can't remember her last name. A meeting for small local business owners, which some people weren't able to attend, about town buying local and procuring. We learned a lot, and we had implemented a new procedure. It's made a suggestion, and it seems to be working out well. I've already had some good feedback, and I do appreciate that very much. One of the things I was hoping to talk to the town about tonight as the council is taking the lead in educating the public in the large contributions that businesses make for local people versus internet sales. As you may be well aware, I have a store in the mall. I have a store behind McDonald's. I'm closing the store behind McDonald's. I've also opened a gift shop inside the mall. If you had a chance to go to the mall Friday or Saturday, you would have been appalled at what you saw. The amount of people that were not there is really shocking. We're in trouble. Very quickly. The town needs to take a lead in discussing publicly. If you buy online, you are destroying your community. Excuse me, I'm a little emotional with this. If we have no local business, we have no community. 70% of revenue for this town is generated by the local businesses. If it's gone, you're gone. Please take the lead. And every time you discuss, put out a water bill, that if you buy local, shop local, you are making your community better. We have got to start talking about this and not pretending that the internet sales are not killing us. So I appreciate your help. Lastly, I'm glad to see the Starlight situation is being resolved, and I would like to ask Town Council, once it's appropriate, to seek Mrs. Beatley out and probably take an apology, because I don't believe that that situation should have ever gotten that situation. And as I stood here 2 months ago, talking about a layman's term discussion of the legal interpretation of the ordinance as it was, as I pointed out, I would respectfully ask that council review their legal counsel. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to address council?
I'd like to make one comment to Mr. Walker's comments. We were actually in your store on Sunday in the mall, and I want to reinforce what you're saying about the absence of people. It's scary. It's downright scary. Who's not at the mall at Christmas time or at the holiday season? It's worth commenting. We were actually in your store 2 days ago, and it's our daughter's favorite place to go. But it is. I just want to comment. I want to reinforce that aspect. We really need to put that at the top of our list. Is think about that. Be aware of these trends.
You know, but the tax and the internet, I mean, that's not our, I think that comes from the state and the federal government or with that. But I think that would be good if we got into it and talked to our delegates and told them, you know. And I think I support that. I think that's only fair to keep the playing field, you know, somewhere even.
We had an email and a request for action from the Chamber of Commerce several months ago, and we've kind of set on it for now. But I'd like to look at it again, make sure that the council has it to consider. And I don't know that. I don't think that the United States hinges on what town of Christiansburg is going to do, but at least it adds us to that list of several thousand localities that have supported this to Congress and to the Senate. So I'm going to pull that back out, and maybe we can discuss it again at some point in time in the near future. I do know that this past Saturday was shop local, shop small. And we did a resolution that we added, instead of just that day, we encourage citizens to shop locally every day. So that's part of the written documents from the town of Christiansburg.
Virginia Municipal League did support that also.
Which
we're a member of.
We'll remember that.
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Texting
You know, I can add to that too. My daughter lives in Charleston, South Carolina. She says they're plowing all the malls underneath. They're just plowing them down, and because they're not doing anything, and that's a shame.
Okay, guys, just on that note, I think that, our high school students who aren't here tonight, but the representative is or leads them, I think this is a great conversation that they can start and they can report on to us the first meeting in December. Have that conversation with the Government Association, what Mr. Martin has discussed, because it starts with the behavior. And if they have that discussion, they realize that now, maybe some feedback from them on how to educate our youth, or at least our teenage youth who are out there working and buying and doing a lot of shopping online. But I know personally, I wasn't at the mall this weekend, but that's one thing my wife and I have discussed over the years is, that we each get ourselves, of course, at least one Christmas present. And that's one thing we try to strive for, is to buy local and to search out local for us personally and our kids. So Stacy, I know you're real passionate about it. You should be.
Yeah. And the students aren't here tonight, like you say, but I'll reach out to them tomorrow and see why they weren't here to start with, and then give them this project as well.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else to address council? And I will close public comments, citizens' comments, introductions and presentations. And we recently lost a fixture in the town of Christiansburg. Todd Walters, who had 29 years and 9 months, or 29 years and 6 months in the engineering department, left us to become the town manager of Newmarket.
Well, there he is.
So Todd is here.
He snuck in.
We have a resolution. And Todd, would you come forward?
He's now properly referred to as His Majesty.
Mr. Town Manager, how are you, sir? I'm fine. I'd like to read this resolution recognizing Todd Walters for his service to the town. Whereas Todd Walters began working for the town of Christiansburg on January 19th, 1988. And whereas Todd Walters left employment with the town of Christiansburg as Assistant Director of Engineering Operations and Development on November 3rd, 2017. And whereas Todd Walters illustrated great knowledge of streets, utilities, stormwater, site planning, and engineering practices in his time with the town. And whereas Todd Walters also displayed leadership, intelligence, vision, worth ethics, integrity, and a great disposition in dealing with the public. And whereas town council and town staff deeply appreciate Todd Walters' efforts for the town and is going above and beyond the call of service. And whereas the town council and town staff wish Todd Walters well in his new endeavors as town manager of Newmarket, Virginia, and know he will continue to provide quality service. Now therefore be it resolved that the town of Christiansburg Town Council meeting in a regular session on November the 14th, 2017, formally recognizes and commends Todd Walters for his almost 30 years of service to the town of Christiansburg. Todd?
I appreciate it.
Henry, got the top of your
I won't photobomb him, okay? Todd doesn't want me in there. You can show his counsel. That's why I'm here.
Figured out what bathrooms and stuff.
I have.
That's
the coffee pot.
I like to say I'm awful glad for Todd, but for us it's a huge loss. It really is. Big time loss.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Tell you, Todd, I saw Wayne break down and start crying when he heard that you were leaving, you know?
Todd?
Wayne actually has to work now.
He has to do something for a job. Yeah, he had a life of leisure after about 8 months.
I'll tell you a little funny. We have a mutual friend, and when he found out, he said, "Yes, I already knew that." I said, "How did you already know, Pat?" And he said, "Well, Wayne had already put on Facebook that starting the 1st of December, the production of the engineering department would go up 50% if you leave." Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care, buddy.
And I will tell you, Todd, I've already warned my counterparts in Mount Jackson and Strasburg to be on the lookout for you.
Okay.
Can I add one more thing, please, sir?
Yes, sir.
Not to Todd's stuff, but to what we're talking about with shopping around the town and stuff. This young lady, she's a student at Virginia Tech, and she's helping us with a high school program. And I was wondering if you could get your student at Tech, your classes, to do a research project on this as well.
Okay.
And I'll send a professor something on it too, and see if he'll do a full-blown project on this. Because this could be, good stuff for everybody. Neat to have it.
Harry will also sponsor this financially as well.
They work Henry's just a funny man, isn't he?
Next on our agenda is a presentation of the audit report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2017 by Finance Director Treasurer Val Tweedy. Ms. Tweedy, you got a friend, don't you?
I do. I have a chat tonight. So, you can grab the cookie thing. I can hear you.
Dress up.
Thanks.
So our presentation tonight is going to take a little different format than it has in prior years. Scott Wickham, who is passing out his business card, is audit partner with Robinson, Farmer, and Cox. And under the new rules of APA, the audit firm must present to you the audit opinions and portion of the report. We're still gonna go through kind of our normal charts and graphs and our summary information that we do every year and kind of take a look at that. But a lot of this comes out of, again, the debacle with the city of Petersburg, and APA came out with these new requirements. You all have in front of you a wonderful audit report, the new cover. And they now require that we even send a notarized statement that says y'all got the audit report presented by our audit firm. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Scott and let him do the presentation of the audit opinion and all that. You should be on the next.
Great. Thank you. Again, my name is Scott Wickham, and I am the audit partner in charge of your audit. This is our second year working with your audit. There's been quite a bit of change since we started working with you all. The first year was wrapping our head around a rather large town operation with lots of pieces moving in the finance department. The second year, you all changed a few things. We had a stormwater fee and a new fund, some new staff. So it was quite a bit of changes again. But it's impressive to be able to put together a CAFR that we feel very comfortable will receive GFOA certification again this year with all the changes. And that's credit to the staff, Al and Deanna and the rest of the group doing a great job of putting it all together for us. So first I want to say thanks for all your hard work.
Oh, thank you.
So I know that a lot of hours go into gathering the information and answering my 1,000 emails. So first, it's quite a few late nights. So start off going through the opinions of the audit report here. Start on page 13. Yeah, this is the audit opinion, and this is where we talk about the financial statements themselves. How we feel comfortable about the numbers that are in here. You all have an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion you can get. That basically means we feel very comfortable with the numbers in here, that all of our testing came back clean, everything looks great as far as the numbers go. So again, unmodified opinion is the best you can get. So. I'm not going to go through this report in detail. It's rather lengthy there. I did pass out my cards. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take an email or give me a call. I'm sure Val can also answer your questions. But if you only read part of this report, the MD&A written by Val and Deanna, pages 16 through 24, kind of summarizes the entire audit report for the year. So those are some really good information that we need right there. All right, and then I'm going to keep going with the opinions. So I'm going to jump all the way back here to the back of this report. And pages 129 and 130. This is the gas report, and this is the opinion on the internal controls and how we got to those financials and a little bit of compliance. Again, this is a clean opinion. This is a good opinion. So everything turned out really well as far as compliance with the state requirements, the APA requirements, and the federal requirements. On page 131 and 132 is the final opinion in your audit report, and it's the opinion on uniform guidance. Several years ago, this was called A133. There's quite a few changes with uniform guidance, but again, this is still your opinion on federal funds. When you spend more than $750,000 in federal funds, you're required to have a single audit. And we did that audit, and it came back with a clean audit report again. So your third and final opinion is also a clean opinion of your federal awards there. The federal program we did audit was the highway planning and construction related to multiple different projects you all have going on with the pass-through federal funds. So that's all I really go over in the audit report. There's a whole lot of information in here. I think Val has a pretty lengthy presentation put together with some changes in the high points of this. So I'm going to let her handle that part, but I'll be happy to take any questions you have as you go through it. I did want to pass out a couple of things or review a couple of things. We have a letter to council to you all. At the top it says communication with those charged with governance. Okay. And this is a letter we send to you all to let you know several things. The first section here, or kind of the bottom of the first page, are the estimates that are in your financial statements. There's quite a few. The more and more GASBs and requirements you go, the more estimates the state's put in the financial statements. We do evaluate them, and I feel they're all very reasonable. Your depreciation is a common estimate. It's based on pretty standard industry guidelines. Allowance for doubtful accounts, your collection percentages, the net pension liability with VRS. That's a very significant estimate that goes into that. You all have an outside actuary, or VRS hires an outside actuary to come up with those numbers. They're really large. I'll try to get to that page, but to point out how big of an estimate that is for you all, it's kind of in the middle right here. On page 70 of the audit report, and I'll just kind of announce it to you all, it gives a sensitivity study of that estimate. VRS calculates your liability that they're going to earn 7% on your investments. If you earn 8%, at 7%, it's $9.9 million is the net pension liability. But if they earn 8% on your investments, it's 4.8. Cuts it in half. If they earn 6%, don't do as quite as well as they wanted to, it's 16 million. So that shows you how significant that estimate is in your financial statement. So that's the biggest one I want to point out. That's a big number, and VRS hires an actuary who does all those reports for you all, and we take them and help get them into the financial statements. So I want to point that one out. Your OPEB obligation is also done by an actuary. The town hires Milliman to do that this year. And so there's a little bit of estimate there too. And, a little bit of landfill closure or post-closure monitoring estimate, and the self-help insurance estimate done by the insurance carrier. So in the industry, they're all very, very normal and reasonable estimates, but I wanted to point them out to you as noted they're in there. The rest of this letter kind of goes on to point out if we had any issues with the audit. Everybody's great to work with. I kind of joke a little bit, if I had issues, I probably would have approached somebody before now. But everybody's great to work with, so the audit went really well. The fact that we're able to be here and presenting before the end of November is a great sign. So we do have a few small things. I mentioned to you all the clean opinion. Anything that's not material, not significant, we want to point out. So that's in the separate letter that you'll probably receive. Management recommendations. The state requires that all members of the boards that are appointed complete the economic interest or conflict of interest or disclosure form as appropriate. And we had one member that was filed after the deadline. So I just want to point that out to try and get all those done on time. The states really want to get those done. So they keep changing the requirements every year also, so that doesn't help. But they do want them to be completed entirely and on time. Delinquent tax listing, this is a repeat comment from last year, and I've spoken with Val about this several times. I know that she has been researching in detail. It's an issue with reconciling the software from one report to the other, and they've been working with it. So we want to point out again, it's not material, but it is something that Val's aware of and working on. So. And the next kind of goes in with the next comment, the accounting software. With all of the moving pieces in the finance program I talked about, the finance department has put a lot of workarounds, if you will, or things, checks, and different modules to get one module to the other. They kind of have all those pieces together, but it's a very manual process. It requires a lot of journal entries, and everything came back tested great, but it's just so many manual entries. There's a lot of softwares that are out there that do some of that for you, that can help eliminate some of the manual and risk of error, essentially. But the testing came back clean, so I wanted to point that out. And then the last thing there was reconciling the urban high maintenance survey. We just feel that it would be a better check to also have the finance department assist in that reconciliation, since they're so familiar with the expenditures in those departments. So, again, these items here are very minor. There are issues we want to point out, but I think in general, the audit went really, really well, and I was really impressed with the staff and the financials when we got them. So.
And you're saying that if she had more software, life would be easier for her?
It's possible, yeah. It would be fewer entries that the staff had to do and fewer entries for her to review. So everything came back clean in the testing, but it would help us feel better about it if it was automated and not all manual journal entries, essentially.
And that's what, $2
$2 to $3 million.
$2 million piece of equipment.
It's very expensive.
They're not cheap. So, with that, I think that's all I really have. Did you want me to speak to the APA grading system, or do you plan to go over it? Okay, I can do that. Yeah. No, I mentioned it. Yeah, I kind of mentioned it. Yeah, you did. Okay. So this was the first year that came out with the APA, came up with a FAM score. And we've had several conversations with the APA about this FAM score. The most recent one is, don't worry about that, that didn't matter. Well, that was Vernon Times and other news articles already had it, and it was out there reporting different people's scores. So the APA kind of backtracked on it as far as not wanting this to be a measurement method. But it still is. It's still ratios based on your financial statements. And the town came back in great shape. So that's good. The APA said we want it to be a warning signal, but not the only rating system that's out there. They're going to reevaluate and probably change some of the ratios, but it's better to come back looking really healthy and really good. And I agree when looking at the financial statements, the town is in great shape with a very revenue base and a solid fund balance. So there is that new score out there, and you'll probably see that and see reported some, but the town did very well on that. That is a result of Petersburg's audit. The city of Petersburg had negative cash on their balance sheet, and it was a big number, negative cash, and it apparently didn't reach, they didn't have much money until too late. So now there's a score coming out, and the APA is doing some interviews with people who rate poorly on this testing. As I said, you all did very well, so they didn't have to do additional interviews with your staff, but that is something that's out there now. I don't really have anything else to do. They call it a stress test, those kind of things, but you all did really well. So, and I think I'll turn it back over to Val, and I'll be here if you have additional questions. So.
Scott's firm has been really good to work with. First year of an audit is always a struggle. Changes in auditors, changes in process. What's important to one firm is different than another firm. So last year was a struggle, but this year went much easier, was much better. Now that they know our systems and all that, it was much easier, and Scott's staff was wonderful. The only complaint I have is that he likes to send emails at like 1 o'clock in the morning, which I don't answer at 1 o'clock in the morning.
That's fine. It's on my head.
Just likes to send them. So, but no, it's been good. I'll back up just a little bit, just to talk a little bit more about this wonderful, great big report. Scott's comment is correct. The MD&A is kind of a summary of everything, a little bit more in layman's terms than all of our fancy CAFR talk with all the acronyms. So we try and put it in a little bit more English in the MD&A. Also, the letter of transmittal, which is the first part of the audit, has a lot of kind of narrative stuff that's a little more English language too. The other thing that I always like to point out is that there's basically 2 levels of financial statements. The first set of financial statements are the government-wide. Those are the financial statements that are put on a level sort of kind of equivalent to a business world, where we book the net pension liability for VRS and all of the liabilities from everywhere and all of the fixed assets and all of the long-term debt show up in those 2 financial statements, or what I call the top financial statements. They're the first ones you'll find in the audit report. Those are what we call the government-wide. And then after that, you have the fund level financial statements, which is what you're more accustomed to seeing on a day-to-day basis from us. It's just kind of the fund level. It's mostly cash in, cash out, capital outlay, debt, and all that stuff shows up normally. And that's what you'll see in the fund level financial statements. So, and then they are reconciled in there, the differences between the 2. So, how'd we do? This is our 5-year trend of revenues for each fund. The general fund came in about 637,000 higher this year. Special revenue was up. Cemetery funds were about equal. Capital project funds were up. And enterprise water and sewer fund was up. And of course, stormwater, this was our first year for the fee on that. A little bit on the differences in the general fund. That was a little bit more highway money, just a few other small incremental changes, mostly due to meals tax coming in a little higher than what we had anticipated. Special revenue funds, they're very much geared toward whatever the grant is. And most of our grants are reimbursable only to the extent that we expend the funds. So you'll see when we get to the next slide, we spent more money there too. So the revenue kind of follows that, and a lot of them are capital project related, and so they'll fall in there. The other big piece of special revenue is obviously the third-party EMS billing funds, and they were a bit higher this year. General fund projects, or capital projects, we did complete a few more projects this year, and therefore the revenue's up on that. Water and sewer fund, I think that's a direct reflection of the increases that we had in going to the monthly billing in the prior year, and of course the new stormwater fee. On the expenditure side, this is our 5-year trend for that. Our expenditures were way down. The big difference in the expenditures in the general fund was the moving of the stormwater fund in 2016. Stormwater fund was in general fund. In 2017, it's now all moved into its own fund. So the numbers in 2016 reflect some of those storm drain projects and stream restoration projects that were done in 2016 in that fund, and that's the primary change there. Special revenue funds, again, we just spent more, we got more grants, completed more projects. Cemetery fund was down a little bit. General fund, again, we just completed more projects. And water and sewer fund, that's primarily the increase in the water and sewer rates from the authority, the water rates, I should say. So budget to actual, what did it look like? We came out, the green bars are the budget. So on the revenue side, if your revenues are more than your budget, that's a good thing, which they were for both the general fund and the enterprise water and sewer fund. And on the expenditure side, you want your actual number to be less than your budgeted number. That's a very positive thing. We were a little, didn't complete a few projects, and that was part of it, but some of it was just general savings in our expenditure budget. So that's a good thing when expenditures are less than budget in both the water and sewer fund. I added this slide this year. It just added the stormwater fund in terms of the budget and actual numbers, the special revenue fund and the cemetery fund. And again, there's the same trend where our actuals are better numbers than our budget. Okay. There we go. Okay, this is kind of a quick pick to give you an idea about where all of our revenues come from. 20%, total revenues are 43.almost 8 million. 20% is coming from water and sewer, 10% from property taxes, 16% from meals tax, 6% from business license tax. So those are our big things, and then 22% is intergovernmental revenue. And I'm going to kind of run down the list over here. I like the graph because it's a quick pictorial and you can kind of pick out the big numbers real fast. But just to talk about a few of these numbers a little bit, the franchise tax is the consumer utility franchise tax and the bank franchise tax. That's what goes into that number. Of course, lodging and meals tax, sales tax, and property taxes. We're all familiar with those. The other big number is charges for services. That is predominantly garbage service. And then intergovernmental revenue is made up of a whole bunch of pieces. It's about 3.9 million for highway funds, $500,000 for law enforcement funds. It's consumer utility tax, communications tax, mobile home tax, and then there's a bunch of little ones that go in there that make up that $9.6 million, 22% of our budget. Water and sewer, we've talked about those revenues, and the stormwater, of course, collections were a whole lot better than we had anticipated, so we did very well last year with that. And other is literally other. It is a whole mishmash of things. It is PD overtime, reimbursements, it's fines and fees and alarms that are really small dollar amounts in and of themselves. But they do add up to almost $800,000. But it is a real hodgepodge of different things. It can be refunds, insurance rebates, all kinds of things like that. So that's where a lot of it is. Now, where did it go? Where did we spend it all? Almost $3 million was administrative cost. Police, fire, rescue, and building inspections made up $9.2 million of the budget. Public Works, which is all streets and, I used to say storm drain, but it's not storm drain anymore. Sanitation,
Spring and fall cleanup.
recycle, spring and fall cleanup. It's all of those public works functions excluding stormwater and water and sewer. So everything public works does is in that number. Parks and recreation, which includes the aquatic center, is $5.8 million, and that's pretty even split. Community development is 1.4. Capital outlays, these are the general fund. Capital projects was 2.4 million. Debt service in the general fund was $1 million. Cemetery was 214. Water and sewer fund expenditures were 7.9, and stormwater was 401 in operating. Water and sewer and stormwater are both enterprise funds, so they do not reflect the capital outlay numbers. They do not reflect principal payments on debt because they're treated like a business. They're not expenditures. They're investments long term. So these numbers include depreciation but exclude capital outlay and principal payments on debt.
Ms. Tweedy, the debt service, the 1.21 basically, what is the majority of that, the debt service on right now?
That's the general. That's only general fund. Doesn't include the water and sewer fund debt.
Is that mainly aquatic at this point, or still?
Pretty much, yeah. There's a little bit of debt on the land that we did a couple years ago and police department renovations.
On the third floor?
Yeah. So, but a good portion of that debt that we took out was also for some water and sewer projects. So a lot of that debt is in the water and sewer fund.
Okay.
Our fixed assets, net of depreciation, have increased by about $500 million. So all the stuff we do, plus all the depreciation that we have every year, we've increased about $500,000 in the general fixed assets. This is just a quick current assets and liabilities and long-term debt. What's total debt compared to assets and liabilities? Current assets have gone up about $3 million. Current liabilities are up, and that just vacillates from year to year depending on when a payroll hits and payroll accruals at the end of the year and that kind of stuff, where they are exactly on June 30th. And then long-term debt, it's that up and down about $2 million for reduction of principal each year. Fund balance grew a lot this year, and we have the breakout. You see 2014 to 2017, and the breakout between non-spendable. Non-spendable fund balance is really your investment in fixed assets, net of debt, and the perpetual care funds for the cemetery. You can't spend those funds. They're either in a fixed asset you really can't spend it, or it's in a perpetual care fund that is actual dollars that's there to maintain the cemetery in perpetuity. Restricted funds are those funds that you can only spend for that which the donor said you can. Assigned fund balances are those that each year in the budget process we say we want to set aside certain amounts of money to go into reserve funds for future projects. So those are all the assigned fund balances. And then unassigned is what's available for us to spend or to appropriate and to have available in our fund balance in accordance with our fund balance policy. So here's our fund page. I have updated this, and in a minute, Andrew, could you put up that Excel spreadsheet for me? So our fund balance policy basically says we take our general operating expenditures for those essential functions, water, sewer, stormwater, general fund, administration, all of those things that are essential. And what are those operating costs? And then what percentage of that do we want to maintain in a fund balance so that we can continue on if there's big swings in revenue or the economy takes a tank or something like that, you have reserves to buffet you. Also, if there's some emergencies that come along. So because of the significant growth we had this year, our total operating expenditures end at 29.8. Our fund balance is at 23.9, which is 80%. We rolled over $5 million of the projects into next year, which puts us at 63.45. And then we also assigned another $800,000 in the budget to those assigned fund balances. That leaves us at 60.76%, which is way over our target of where we want to be.
But we're gonna spend those next year, right?
We're working on it. We're always working on spending money, right, Mayor?
You didn't let me have my
our
slush fund
desired
yet.
fund balance is between 35 and 40%. If it goes beyond that, we say we need to do something. So we have a budget amendment before you of 1.876, which will bring our number down to 54.47. This is updated from what was in the package and what was in my presentation. So I just kind of went through this morning. So my suggestion would be that we look at putting some more additional assignments in for about $4 million, which would bring us down to about 41%.
Do we have an identity of those additional assignments?
Yeah, I'm gonna
Okay, you haven't got
see
there
if
yet.
those is that other guy. Just close that one. If you would please.
Go listen. Go
Yeah,
back to the.
close the spreadsheet and go back to the presentation. Thank you. Okay, so
There we go, right there.
kind of went through the numbers there, and this is kind of a recommendation I have, that we would consider putting $4 million into assigned fund balance to accommodate some of the major projects that we know are coming down the line in the next year or two, as well as some new grant funding projects that Wayne presented to you in resolutions tonight will require a great deal of commitment and contributions to, and to help reduce hopefully some of our future financing needs. So recommendation would be to put $1 million into the recreational reserve, $1 million into the wastewater treatment fund reserve, $500,000 into the software reserve, $500,000 into street reserve, and to create a new reserve for the capital projects of $1 million. That would help to fund some of those projects that you had before you in the consent agenda tonight. So that would be my suggestion with respect to that.
Ms. Tweedy, the $4 million here that we would be reassigning from unassigned, basically, to get our percentage down to where we're within that, what, 35 to 45 parameter. That would not be including the 1.8 on the budget amendment, correct? That we've already otherwise reassigned as of the vote tonight?
That actually already moved it down to the 54.
It's already down.
So, yeah.
So that actually moved it down to the 50. So basically, we were, well, I'll say 5.8 above where we wanted to be at to be
We
considered
were like
very healthy.
60-some%.
So my question, at what point on the forecast were we looking at this thinking, my goodness, we are, I mean, that's a great problem to have, don't get me wrong. It's a fantastic problem to have, but, I mean, was it surprising to have this amount sitting there? I understand revenues, again, where things are moving in a certain direction, but how surprised were we when we did the audit numbers and looked at our fiscal, if you will,
I was
health?
actually surprised that we didn't have that, that we had that high of a fund.
That seems like it's huge.
Yeah, yeah. It was a lot bigger than.
I mean, forecasts were saying we're going to have something, but not to that extent.
Yeah, the forecast was like 20 million, and we came in at 23.9. So, but a good chunk of that is when we budget for a capital project.
Roller.
And it's a $2 million capital
Right.
project, and we spend $100,000.
Well, hence the 1 million
And
in
you do
reserve.
that, and you do that with a couple of projects,
Mhm.
and pretty soon you have $4 million. So, and that's really why I'm suggesting that, you know, a lot of those projects, sometimes we budget just the engineering in a year. But we know we have to commit to the actual construction of that project going down the road. So I don't think it's really, it wouldn't be prudent to spend it like we were gonna have it all the time, because
Right.
I think part of it is due to, we've made these commitments on these projects and we're gonna have to meet those
Eventually, that's
commitments. Which would be why my suggestion is to put some of these in these reserves.
What percentage of that 5.8 million would have been otherwise a reassigned or rollover to the next year capital project amount that was set aside? Or budget, I should say.
Well, we rolled part of it, but I can't off the top of my head, I
Mhm.
don't think clearly answer that question, because a lot of it is where we have a capital project where we've budgeted for the design of the project, but we haven't budgeted for the construction.
Mhm.
Maybe year one we did, so we kind of rolled it over, but we're rolling it over and rolling it over. So we're trying to take a little different tact on how we budget for that and how we look at it into the future. We're working harder on CIP this year to plan those out and know that we'll have enough funds, and to maybe get this a little bit under tighter control so we don't have that huge gap. So.
Okay.
So, overall, I think we did well. Revenues were a little greater. Their revenue numbers are moving up, but just like across the state and across the country, it's small, steady growth. It's not huge growth. There's nothing huge happening in the world. So we did better in terms of our revenues and less in terms of our expenditures, and we talked about the fund balance number. Some of the major initiatives that we completed this year were the Park Street Storm Drain Project and sidewalks, the Church Brown Lucas Storm Drain, the new curb and gutter and paving on West Main and Depot, and the downtown streetscape was finally completed this year. That was going on when I got here, so. So we're moving into the budget process this year. We're hoping to start it much earlier this year. And as I mentioned a minute ago, put a little more focus on CIP and trying to plan that out more into the future. We also know that we have a few strategic goals that we want to meet in this year's budget to reduce the healthcare costs to our employees, for families, and that's been a huge burden for them. And then we have a number of strategic capital projects that are in the works that hopefully as we roll into the budget we'll have answers on as to funding from VDOT and other sources and how much we would have to contribute to that. So we'll be moving forward from that perspective. Questions?
The insurance firms have not given you a quote yet, are they concerning?
We met today on that, and their projection is to have some different scenarios and plans together for us for early February.
Early February. And that will come our way eventually.
Oh, yeah.
Miss Tweedy, I'd just like to say we're awfully glad you're here.
Well, thank you. I'm glad
Appreciate you
to be
very
here.
much.
Steve, you can figure out where to get that casino down here, but it'll be floating.
I hear you talking.
Val can run one. She's done that. Thank you, Val. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, before I go any further, I want to apologize to our newly elected council person, Marissa Sachs. I forgot to just welcome you at the first of the meeting. I got into this thing, but welcome aboard. We're kind of breaking her in a little bit at a time, try not to overwhelm her. But thanks for coming out. Thanks for being here. Discussion on action by mayor and committee reports. Anything going? Rec, finance? Any other committees that we got going? Okay. Under discussion by mayor and council action on conditional use permit request by Linda S. McMurray, agent for J&E Inc. for a kennel, animal daycare, overnight boarding at 569 North Franklin Street in the B3 General Commercial District. Property is designated as business commercial on future land use map for the town of Christiansburg, 2013.
I would move that we approve the CUP request by Ms. McMurray pursuant to the public hearing that we had at the last council session.
I second it.
The motion and a second. Any comments, suggestions, questions?
Wish them well and hope they have
Absolutely.
plans for expanding soon, maybe the next
That's right.
year or two. Will
With
gear up.
conditions.
Wait, I'm sorry, we did it again with the conditions.
We do
Reset.
our very best with that.
Yeah, we do. But I need to move to modify that motion, Madam Attorney, to include the provisions.
Yes, you can.
Okay, but I would move to amend my motion to approve the CUP request by Ms. McMurray to include those provisions that have been as stated.
And I second it again.
Got a motion and a second. Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. Councilman Bishop? Councilman Collins?
Aye.
Councilman Hall?
Aye.
Councilman Hubbard?
Aye.
Councilman Showalter?
Aye.
Councilman Stipes?
Aye.
This is 6-0. Thank you. Welcome to town. You must have been confident, because I swear I went by the other day and I saw an open sign in your window.
We're open for retail and grooming. We've
Okay.
already opened through.
Okay, I was worried about that sign. That's
No,
confident.
I wanted to, yeah, this was just an additional.
Okay, very good. Very, very good. Resolution for budget modification number 1 for fiscal year 2017-2018 annual budget.
As a member of the Finance Committee, I'll throw this on the table for council action by making a motion that we approve the budget modification as presented.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. Councilman Bishop? Councilman Collins?
Aye.
Councilman Hall?
Aye.
Councilman Hubbard?
Aye.
Councilman Showalter?
Aye.
Councilman Stipes?
Aye.
It is 6-0. Thank you. Appropriation resolution for budget modification number 1 for fiscal year 2017-2018 annual report.
I'll likewise make a motion as a member of the Finance Committee that council approve the resolution for budget modification number 1 as presented. I'll make a motion that we approve appropriation resolution for budget modification.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Councilman Bishop? Councilman Collins?
Aye.
Councilman Hall?
Aye.
Councilman Hubbard?
Aye.
Councilman Showalter?
Aye.
Councilman Stipes?
Aye.
It is 6-0. Approval of a new application for community support. I think we looked at this last meeting or meeting before and made a few modifications to it, and those modifications have been they were presented within the agenda.
They're in your packet.
Yes. Includes basically an exemption for structures that are on the National Register of Historic Places or the Virginia Landmarks Register from the ownership requirement.
So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the updated application for annual support for community programs.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. Councilman Bishop? Councilman Collins?
Aye.
Councilman Hall?
Aye.
Councilman Hubbard?
Aye.
Councilman Showalter?
Aye.
Councilman Stipes?
Aye.
It is 6-0. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a recommendation for appointment to the Christiansburg Board of Zoning Appeals. We're recommending, and this is just an appointment, we have to write the judge, Jim Van Hoosier to fill a 4-year term. And while we're at it, Ernie Wade's term ended on August the 31st of 2017, but Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, he serves even past that until we say, no, you're not serving anymore. And he is willing to serve another 5 years. Mr. Van Hoosier is willing to serve 5 years,
But, yeah, but
4 years.
It'd be the remainder.
this terms.
And a 4-year term, right?
It'd be the remainder of a term. It's 5 1-year, 5 terms all staggered.
Okay, very good.
I'll make a motion that we recommend Mr. Jim Van Hoosier to our Board of Zoning Appeals to fulfill the unexpired 4-year term remaining.
I'll second.
How about Mr. Wade?
Do you want to do them separately?
That's what?
All right, go
It's two
ahead.
different recommendations.
Let's go ahead. Any other comments or questions?
Well, I think these are two outstanding people.
They are.
Both been on council and both worked with the town for years, and I don't think you could find two better people
I agree.
to take these jobs.
Yep, both work well together, too.
Mhm.
So, thank you. All those in favor of recommending Mr. Van Hoosier, Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. Councilman Bishop? Councilman Collins?
Aye.
Councilman Hall?
Aye.
Councilman Hubbard?
Aye.
Councilman Showalter?
Aye.
Councilman Stipes?
Aye.
Thank you.
And I'll make a second recommendation for the appointment of Ernie Wade, once again to the Board of Zoning Appeals, to fulfill a new 5-year term.
I'll second.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, again, I know you play a role, obviously, in helping to recommend who we're looking at, and these are fantastic appointments, and they'll do a lot of justice to the town of Christiansburg, and Mr. Wade, of course, has been doing that for a long time as well. Mr. Van Hoosier's fantastic and be a great addition.
You'll be prepared,
He will be prepared,
Madam Clerk.
very much so.
Yes, sir. Councilman Bishop? Councilman Collins?
Aye.
Councilman Hall?
Aye.
Councilman Hubbard?
Aye.
Councilman Showalter?
Aye.
Councilman Stipes?
Aye.
It is 6-0 on both. Staff reports. Town manager?
I mentioned at last council meeting that Karen Walters was retiring from the town at 30-year service, and Mayor and I were discussing it this morning. I was just wondering if you'd entertain adopting a resolution recognizing her service with the town.
30 years.
I think it would be a good thing to do. She's been, God, I can't believe now, after 30 years, we don't have a Walters on staff anymore. So, but anyway, yeah, I would like to see us do that. I think Mr. Wingfield could do something close to that, or we can put one together, and
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will get it, we'll get it done. I will forward it out to you so that you give me a thumbs up on it, and then we'll hopefully try to present it December meeting if we have time. Oh, done with it, okay.
I just point out Chief Hank's mother-in-law passed away this past week, and also, as the Mayor mentioned, Joe Cole's mother passed away this morning. I was wondering if the town would be willing to make a donation to the fire and rescue departments in lieu of sending flowers. It's just
I think that's a
consideration.
good idea.
I mean, that's general head nod, we're okay?
Yeah.
What do you say, 1,000 each? Right over this. We'll work on that figure.
Yeah. $100 seemed like an appropriate amount.
Do what?
$100 seemed like an appropriate amount.
That's about what we would spend on
Flowers and things.
flowers, wiring out particularly. Okay.
And I know I brought up work sessions that are pending at the last meeting. I know, of course, some of those are the park discussion, the Tourism Development Council presentation, wayfinding signage, and a work session on FOIA and conflict of interest training, and also a presentation from the Small Business Development Council. I know Cord wanted to have the meeting on the park, if we could, in December. That was maybe the one meeting that I heard that you might want to have in December. Would you be open to having it in December, or do you want to put that off until January? I guess I'll give Cord the last chance to have input
Well,
on that.
one thing I was looking at is we're only going to have the one meeting now in December, I believe on the 12th, if memory serves, because the second meeting will fall on the 26th. But certainly I'll be deferring the council. If we do have that meeting, it would be in the form of a work session.
Yes, it would.
And I believe it may be worthwhile as well to invite the Recreation Commission to be a part of, and certainly Mr. Epperly and the group that have played a vital role from the beginning. But I'll certainly defer to council, guys. It's up to you all.
I was saying, we have no other work session planned for that day, do we?
No, we don't, not at this time.
I don't see there's anything wrong with that, thinking that we're only gonna have one meeting in December and meet at 5:30 or something like that. To me, that would be fine.
How long do you and usually that's about a 2-hour meeting normally?
Hour and a half, could be 2 hours. Make it as
You want to
long
go
as
5?
you want.
I mean, I'm dictating everybody's work schedules here.
Y'all be okay? Y'all got to go from
For this,
Blacksburg.
yeah,
So 5
I'll
to
leave
7?
early.
5.
That'd be great. Thank you.
On
I
the
think it's
12th.
on the same night as their council meeting.
And if certainly if-
December,
And we
right?
have all of the swearing ins that night.
That's right.
Of the council and mayor.
And Ms. Sachs, again, I could extend a very warm welcome to be a part of that as well, that work session, and meet the members of the Recreation Commission as well. Yes, ma'am.
Well, okay, I'll have my people call your people.
Have
we'll
it
meet
here
at
and invite the
5?
Rec Commission.
Do what?
Have it here and invite the Rec Commission.
If you all would mind, I think that'd be a great
Oh,
idea.
I think so.
I appreciate that.
what now?
5:30?
I think it was 5.
5,
5 o'clock.
yeah. I think that could run hour and a half, 2 hours, and we've got a meeting.
It'd be nice to have it there, though, wouldn't it?
No, because you have to run over
You
here.
have to travel though.
You have to run over
We'll
here.
just have it.
This week we can meet
Just have it here. They can travel
6:55.
They can have it. Okay, ready?
That's all I've got.
All right.
It'd be nice to change it.
Madam Attorney?
Once in a while.
What?
Okay. Any other staff here to make reports on anything? Town council reports. Mr. Hall, I'm gonna let you lead off.
I'll be quick. Let me real quickly thank Ms. Tweedy for the audit report. We always get somewhat lost within the 130 plus pages of the budget normally every year, but it sounds like we are very fiscally, if you will, solvent, and certainly very fiscally healthy, and certainly that you play a large role in that yourself and Mr. Wingfield, and I'm very appreciative. And the way you are able to explain the audit report, I like to use the term, I don't mind to be self-deprecating, but you dumb it down for me. It allows me to digest it in elements in which I can taste. I really appreciate that. I don't think you'll know how much I appreciate you over the years. Real quickly, Rec Commission, we had I've already reported as of the last meeting, what we did, the first meeting of November. We've got one more this year. Everybody that's here, everybody's on the cameras, welcome. It's the first Monday in December. I'll extend an invitation to the Rec Commission, probably do it beforehand, but we'll certainly bring that up as well to help them go ahead and schedule to be here on the 12th. There's a possibility that, trying to think if, I guess Mr. Wingfield, that if we're going to have them all here for 2 hours on the 12th, maybe they might not have that Recreation Commission meeting if they're going to have to reschedule things to be able to free themselves up on the 12th. So I'll find that out the next day, or we'll certainly make everybody aware. But as of right now, it's always open to the public, and anybody can come in and talk about any topic they'd like to bring up for the Recreation Center. And I think the one thing we're going to be talking about is a particular 13-year-old young boy that came in at the last meeting and asked if we could have some offerings that would be more around his age in town. And I thought he did a very good job. So that's one thing that will come up at the next meeting. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bishop?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Mr. Collins?
Yes, sir. I'd like to thank Public Works again. The Christmas stuff that you put out,
That is
awesome.
nice. That is.
I mean, he did a great job. They bought a bunch of new stuff to put down here over the hill in Cambria, and that makes those folks awful happy. You won't believe how many phone calls I've had today because of that. Seriously, thank you very much, buddy. What do you buy me for Christmas? Well, it's supposed to be funny. No.
Mr. Happert, I'm sorry, I'm just getting carried away in the moment here.
Now, as council, we are going, for the Christmas parade, we're gonna meet and walk
I'm
together.
gonna
Is that
cover
what you
that.
decided?
I'm gonna cover that in my
You're gonna do
report.
that, okay. The only thing I would like is that Mr. John Deal, again, he did another excellent job of presenting stuff here, and it's nice to see that Christiansburg is building on and moving on. And thank you.
Mr. Showalter?
Are you done?
I'm done.
Regional Commission, we had a representative from Tech show up and go over their master plan. I've seen it a few times, but it's a very aggressive one. It included the transportation hub that they are going forward with in the next year that we talked about during our transit meeting before that. But it's very interesting. It is online. I would encourage council or anybody in the audience to look it up. It's pretty neat. And that's it for my reports, but I do want Jim to pass along a thanks to his crew. Thanksgiving Day, there was, or actually the day before that, there was a water break on my street. And actually Thanksgiving Day, the crew came out and they were there majority of the day, and that's some of the things we forget about as town citizens on these holidays, where we find those very, that we have to be off those days. And we always have to remember these crews are out there when something breaks. These public works, police officers, or emergency services, they're at a beck and call of our citizens. And that's when I was going out to eat, they were still there working. When I came back, and they were still there working. So There's quite a few times I can remember that on 10-degree days when water main breaks. I remember down there driving by those guys and just feeling sorry for them, but those are the guys out there making it happen for our citizens, and they understand that. But Jim, if you could just pass along thanks. I know my neighbors noticed it, and they made a point of coming up to me over the weekend and saying something about it. So thank you.
I sure would.
Mr. Stipes?
Yep, this is going to be a bit unusual.
Okay.
Usually, making a formal statement, I write it out so I don't forget it, but I want it to be from the heart. And I want to address council. If you got to eat crow, I understand it's best to eat it when it's still warm. The last meeting, we had an important discussion, or it turned out to be a far more important discussion I thought it was, is on the Chamber of Commerce funding. And I want to personally apologize to Mr. Bishop and anyone else on the council or in the community that I may have offended. I think my heart was in the right place. My brain and my mouth were not. And what I mean by this is when we talked about funding, council funding for the Chamber of Commerce dinner, the reminder came up about the Freedom Fund, the recent Freedom Fund banquet. And there's some very appropriate comments made, and I wanted to apologize for my thoughts that evening, because I think, again, my heart was in the right place, my mind and my brain were not. But I want to make the point that we do need to, as a council, decide how we're going to commit to these activities. But in the past, I've attended a number of the Freedom Fund banquets, not every year, last year with my back surgery and so forth. But my point is, when I attended the Freedom Fund banquet this year, I did notice at least one other locality sat together and made a very nice statement. And so my mind changed on that, and probably the more appropriate thing for me to do to be consistent this year would have been to not support the Chamber of Commerce dinner, and then let's look at all of them next year. But I just want to apologize to those on council that I may have offended, or those in the community, because I do think both are worthwhile activities for us to fund, and I do intend to support those next year.
I think the charge was from you all to me to develop that portion of it for the budget and get back to you all. It won't be a budget buster, but it'll be consistent and fair. I've got a couple of 3 or 4 things. The Christmas parade is December the 8th. They light the tree about 7 o'clock. We are going to walk together again as council and families. I thought if we could assemble sometime around 6:30, depending on the weather. Hopefully it's not going to be 7 degrees this year. We got a decent trend going. It was brisk last year. One of the additions that we have had to it is the students from Ignite College are going to start at their facility on Main Street. They've got a group of carolers, and they're going to come up the street caroling about 30 minutes before the parade, and they're going to they're going to assemble at the tree lighting, and they'll sing a couple carols right there too. I talked to Mike Larkin, and they're extremely excited about it.
We're going to meet at the tree. Where do you want council to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tree is fine. I mean, that would be the ideal spot. 6:30, 6:45, I'm not sure. Melissa hadn't told me exactly what time we kick everything off.
Tree lighting's at 6:55.
6:55, okay. So we're getting close to it. The other, I passed around a letter from the Christiansburg Community Center about their open house on December the 3rd from 2 to 4. We'll remind you all of that if you can attend. They have done renovated the first floor of one of those buildings, so they kind of want to show off their work, I think. So I would recommend anybody that can. I had asked for a work session on committees and things, and I'm not gonna ask for a work session. I've got about 90% of that done, and I will run it by in written form prior to acting on them, and actually I act on them until the 1st of January, but just to see where we are. I've got a couple of recommendations we're going to need to do probably next week or at our next meeting. There's a couple of authorities that or commissions that we've got some members that we've got to reappoint them, and a couple of new openings and a couple of things like that. So I'll try to get all that out prior to the meeting on the 12th, just to kind of show you what I'm thinking about.
Got Cord signed up for those?
Oh, yeah.
Can't get off the way.
All right, anything else in the form of council reports? Under other business?
Yes,
good.
sir.
I'm
I
sorry.
forgot to mention about the planning commission. The members of the planning commission, we want to add some more people, and we'll be advertising that first of the year probably.
First, well, we'll hopefully advertise it this in December. Try to move on with it. Is that right, Andrew? Is that what we talked about?
We can start in December.
Yeah.
Start the advertisement, okay.
Yeah, that would be good.
I'll nominate Mr. Hall.
I second it.
So that's,
You know, you give them the big bucks here, you'd like to use 25 bucks. Any other business?
there's something that I've been considering this evening, and I'm going to make it in the form of I'll make a motion that we entertain two matters this evening before we go into closed session. There was a public hearing this evening in regards to Mr. Neal. There's a rezoning request and then a CUP pursuant to the rezoning request. We've heard no public comments to the negative. We have a recommendation from the Planning Commission that's a positive. And my understanding is the town is not concerned, or is there a reason for concern, a reason for us to pause at this juncture?
The one item, yeah,
Is the R1 to R3 issue was the only one that's outstanding?
correct, and that we are finalizing the ordinance, and the proffer statement does need to be, there was the parcel numbers, there's a clarification on that.
There's a clerical issue?
As well as the owner does need to sign the proffer statement.
Well, in that case, I'm fine to. We'll take it up on the 12th and make sure it's all accurate.
Very good.
But I just want to bring that up, that if that wasn't the case, then I see no reason we couldn't move forward. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bishop?
Okay.
It's a long one.
Request for a closed meeting under Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A5 for discussion concerning prospective business or industry or the expansion of an existing business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the business or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community. The closed meeting is being held to discuss economic development prospects.
I second.
Well, let me do the other one.
Oh, go ahead.
All right, there are two. Sorry.
It's okay.
Request for a closed meeting under Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7 for consulting with legal counsel and briefing by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable legal litigation where such consultation or briefing in open meetings would adversely affect the negotiation or litigation posture of the public body, or consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by public body regarding special legal matters requiring the provisions of legal advice by such counsel. For purpose of this subdivision, probable litigation means litigation that has been specifically threatened or which the public body or its legal counsel has a reasonable basis to believe in the commencing by or against a known party, specifically relating to the Starlight Drive-In Theater North litigation. Now, that's a form of motion. Jeez, you're killing me.
Run that by me.
You're killing me. I'll never do this again.
We have a form of a motion.
That is a motion,
Second.
We
yes.
have a motion and a second. We enter into closed session for two items. Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. Councilman Bishop?
Aye.
Councilman Collins?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman Tupper?
All right.
Councilman Showalter?
Aye.
Councilman Stipes?
Aye.
Stop.
I was going to recommend that Ms. Sachs is involved.
She is. We're ready to go on that. We're going to take about a 4 or 5 minute emergency quick break.
He said psych.
You done? Are we good now? Can you edit this part out, our dialogue? Huh?
What we need to do?
So, we, council action on the matter is we are not taking any action on either matter discussed in closed session tonight. Anything else to come before the town council?
No.
We're adjourned.